The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily represent those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting group. Access Fort Wayne is a department of the Allen County Public Library. If you or anyone you know might be interested in making a television show, please call 260-421-1250.
Welcome to the Mind, Body, Spirit show, and today's show is about the mind, our memory. I think you'll find this to be very interesting and actually hopeful. And so what is memory anyhow? It's the power or process of reproducing or recalling what has been learned or retained, okay? Or the capacity to learn and retain new information, to recall the information when needed, and to recognize instances of familiarity when we can be exposed to new information or express it in the future. So it's, in history, they really didn't know where the memory came from. And I'll review that with you in a little bit. So there are many different types of memory. Sensory memory, and I'll explain those in a minute. Primary memory, working memory, short-term memory, long-term memory, procedural memory, prospective memory, emotional memory, memory how to play pickleball or tennis like I do, or to tap dance. Okay, let's review these. So sensory memory is when we use our senses, sense of smell, so hearing, something that we might just hear for a second, or someone touches us, and unless you repeat it, you lose it immediately. Okay, someone touches you, or you hear something, and you don't remember it. Repeat it or lose it. Okay, so and there is working memory. It's an more active system to manipulate the uses of digits, for example. That's the reason our phones are in 7 digits, for example, and 3, and then there's 4. We sort of chunk them together, and we can remember that easier, but unless we repeat it or write it down, it isn't always that easy. But working memory is the things that we do around us every day. And so there's some rehearsal involved to make it long-term. You got to repeat it a few times, and then you remember the phone number or how to wash your dishes, for example, or something like that. So short-term memory allows us to learn new names, facts, to build a storage of knowledge. And there are ways of making short-term memory by visualizing it, by repeating it, by connecting it to something, to use some exaggerated vision of it. We're much more likely to remember it. So then we can begin to build a storage of knowledge. The past, the present, and the future. So working memory, the everyday memory that we use around us, we tend to lose some of that as we get a day older. But if we rehearse it, repeat it, build it up, stay healthy, keep a healthy brain through nutrition and exercise, we can maintain an excellent memory till age 90. But you got to work at it. And this is what I'm going to teach you today, okay, to make it a little more permanent memory, okay? So mental exercises do stimulate the memory. So practicing, or sometimes even using online sites, computer games, puzzles that you can do, for example, they do promote neuroplasticity, the building of new brain cells. So we don't just lose brain cells, we can build them too, and I'll teach you about that. So mental exercises like puzzles, reading a book, repeating something, playing games, computer games, for example, can help our long-term memory. But it doesn't seem to help short-term memory or working memory very much. Those exercises help your long-term memory. For example, people that develop illnesses, could even have brain injuries or get a day older, they tend to lose their short-term memory, but will keep the long-term memory. My mother, for example, who lived till age 97, God bless, she could recite to me at age 97 poetry she had learned in Germany in high school. Yeah, unending. They must have taught them a lot of poetry. She could repeat one poem perfectly, one after the other, but at age 97, I think she barely could remember who I was. She recognized my face, but she didn't know my name. So that's sort of how long-term memory works. Long-term memory is much easier to keep intact, and we really have to work the short-term memory. Let's speak about other types of memory: declarative memory and procedural memory. Procedural memory would be explicit memory, like if people develop some impairment of their memory, but they may play perfectly tennis game or pickleball game or soccer or even play chess, and the memory is just fine. But then you ask them what day it is, and they don't know. So that's procedural memory. And then we have automatic memory too. Walking, for example, would be called automatic memory. And we have some emotional memory. The memory, you may not recall it, but the minute you think of some emotion attached to it, boom, it pops into your brain. Your brain has about 100 billion brain cells, okay? But over a trillion neurotransmitters. We have an axon, nerve cell, okay, with a nucleus even. And then we have dendrites, and the axon sends a message. And the memory actually is located in molecules, little bubbles, about 500 at the end of each axon, and goes into the synapse. That's the space between it, jumps onto a dendrite and sends the message on. So your brain is trillions upon trillions of connections between axons and dendrites. You have the largest brain at age 2. At age 2, about 3 pounds. And at age 20, we really lost a few brain cells. And by the 9th grade, we've lost about 90 to 100 grams, if you were to weigh the brain cells. So deterioration occurs. But the good news is that through proper exercise and nutrition and playing brain games and reading books and puzzles and chess and doing these things, you can grow a lot of brain cells. That's the point of it. So we are not just on a downward trajectory. We can stay even and maybe even improve a little bit over time. Okay? But memory loss can result in mental disability, but it's not the necessary outcome of getting a day older. But you got to work at it, so you need to gather the information like you're doing with me today. So as we get a day older, our working memory goes down a little bit, and we slow down a bit. but we also gain more knowledge. We've read more, so it can balance out. And as one man said, as he was getting older and he having trouble with his memory, and he was looking for an excuse, he didn't say, I'm getting older. He said, and this is a good one, my memory is full. Now there's a good one. Remember that one. A memory is full. I'm not just getting older. Remember, I'm 39 for the 44th time. But I'm here. I read 1,500 books in my basement. Play pickleball, tap dance, tennis, read all the time, do TV shows. So I'm working it. Okay? So we have more trouble getting away from irrelevant information as we get older. If you're giving some information and at the same time and it's irrelevant as you get older, you can not distinguish it quite as fast. Okay? And so the aging produces greater difficulty in new learning, and your attention is a little more divided. You can't have 2 or 3 things going at the same time. A younger person can distinguish the 3 a lot easier as you get older. So we have some divided attention. And as you notice, some of the politicians out there today, one of them, a great person, but he now and then seems to come out with the wrong word. Okay? So, but what I say to you about things like that, that's normal. Don't make a disease out of it. Okay? That's a normal part of living. We ignore it, yet they write it up in the press all day long and think it's mental impairment. It's not. It's just part of getting a day on. It's life. We've accepted. You need to accept it. Okay? And what are the 7 sins of memory? Okay? Which happens to all of us as we day on. But I say to you, it's a normal process. Don't make a disease out of it. Okay? Don't call it dementia or Alzheimer's. It's a normal process. We're born, and someday we die. It happens to the plants. It happens to the animals. It happens to us. That's life. Okay? So what are the 7 sins of memory? Transience, that we pay no attention. Alertness goes down a little bit. Some misattribution that the word that we said is really not the correct meaning. Some suggestibility. We may a word that we hear, we may do the wrong thing. Misattribution as part of that. Biases, persistence. So these kind of things come along as we get a day on, but it is normal. Don't make a disease out of it, okay? And now, our thought processes throughout the day, the brain gets very busy. And here's a good suggestion for you. Keep about 4 hours between eating and bedtime. This is very important. I'll tell you why. It takes about that long for your gut to digest what you have just eaten. Okay? And then as you go to bed, then your brain doesn't just totally go to sleep. It has stages to it. Okay? And actually, brainwashing is occurring. Yes. Your brain is being cleansed of the chemicals of memory and the thought process that occur throughout the day. And spinal fluid, fluid that's in the middle of the brain and around the surface of the brain and down the spinal cord, spinal fluid, yes, goes up there and goes between the neurocells and washes this of cells that have died, of proteins, of fats, sugars, that are gumming the brain up, and the spinal fluid washes them. And even the brain cells, yes, brain cells even constrict a little bit to give room for the spinal fluid. Your brain is taking a bath when you go to sleep. So you got to give it a chance to do that. So if you're, and the neurotransmitters and the chemicals of your gut also affect your brain. Yes. The vagus nerve, which leads from the brain down to your gut, sends one impulse down, but the gut sends 10 impulses up to the brain. Yes, yes. A lot of work going on here, a lot of reparative process going on here. So let your brain washing occur from the spinal fluid, and the next day you'll work up with a clear, active mind. Your neurotransmitters, your hormones, your brain cells, your vagus nerve, they've all rested and ready to go to work for the day. So this time between your meal and bedtime, the 4 hours, is an excellent idea. Not all of us can always accomplish that. I mean, we work hard. I wouldn't always have that time, okay? So you hear a lot about Alzheimer's disease, and we all pretend like it's unavoidable. There's nothing we can do about it. And the associations, when you hear about the Alzheimer's Association, do they talk about prevention? No, they don't talk about prevention. They're just about collecting money to keep you in a nursing home. That's what that's all about. I'm for preventing it, keeping you out of the nursing home, and for you not to live into the role. You miss a few words. You say, oh, you get dementia, Alzheimer's disease. You get a test maybe to improve the point, or a brain scan, and say, oh, you get Alzheimer's disease. I realize there's some indication for these tests, but generally, I try to avoid it. What's my exact brain status? Am I taking a verbal test? Am I getting genetic testing? Am I getting a brain test? For Pete's sake, not. How do you want to come back and say, well, it shows the beginning of Alzheimer's disease? How would you like to know that? You will live into the role. They say, well, you got to go to the nursing home. Well, you probably will. I'm for it's time to go to work and turn things around and keep things from getting worse. That's what I'm all about. Eating the right food, exercising, stimulating your brain through activities. Alzheimer's disease was first diagnosed around 1910, somewhere in there, by Albert. And it was based on a patient, 51 years old, who had a lot of memory problems, started at a young age in disease and autopsy. And they found some proteins inside the brain cells and around the brain cells, and they were called amyloid and fibrillary tangles, and they named the disease. These were dysfunctional proteins from metabolism of the brain. They had not been cleansed out of there. Remember, I spoke about that. The cleanse, the washing out that occurs during the night. A few of them are genetic. Some people have the ApoE gene, and they're more likely to have this disease. But the majority, actually, Alzheimer's disease, dementia, the same term. Well, I mean, the ones who are so highly genetic, I think, and those are a small number, I think should be called something else. So most of us get memory loss, and I'd rather have it called memory loss instead of Alzheimer's disease, because most of it is preventable. Okay, and amyloid is actually a protein from the gut. Yeah. And it climbs up the vagus nerve and goes to the brain. Yeah. So if you're healthy down there, for example, don't have diabetes, for example, you're much more likely to have amyloid in your brain. Prevention. Type 2 diabetes is the biggest cause for dementia that there is. And this amyloid thought is one thing climbing up the vagus nerve. Another is that the insulin, sugar is what the brain uses for energy most of the time, unless you're into fat metabolism and use ketones. Ketones can stimulate the brain, no problem. But it is sugar most of the time. Now, if it's sugar, insulin gets involved, which pushes sugar into the cells, although sugar can enter brain cells without insulin at times too. But the insulin level is so high in diabetics, but then the insulin has to be degraded by IDA, insulin degrading enzyme, IDE, eventually to get rid of it. But since diabetics has such a high level of insulin, all the IDE enzyme is used up. And guess what? The IDE enzyme, what else it does? It degrades amyloid. So amyloid accumulates in the brain. It's very sticky, and that is in the synapse between the nerves. So the impulses can't jump across, and it destroys your memory. There's an explanation, the amyloid in the ID enzyme. And that's why most of the drugs they hand people, how the them work, they're selling them like anything. You notice on the TV, majority are useless. Maybe one of them works for 2 or 3 months. There's no magical pill. That's the reason I say we need to speak about wellness here. And matter of fact, in the spinal fluid, remember I said it cleanses the brain, they called it the glymphatic system, Glym, phatic system. So the spinal fluid cleanses your brain, washes your brain. Yeah. So 4 hours to bed for digestion of your gut, and then we can have the brain wash. Interesting. So, and that is the reason you've heard in the past, eat like a king for breakfast, like a queen for lunch, and like a pauper at night, to give the brain to get the wash. So the dinner is small, or at least 4 hours away if possible. So a huge study was done in England, and found out that your gut is related to your memory, and let's face it, what you eat will determine your health. You are what you eat. You are what you eat. That's how you avoid diabetes. So I want you to avoid diabetes. And sugar is the booger in the hook, let's face it. They used to say it was fat. 50 years they told us fat was the problem. Well, it was the government, industry, lobbying us doctors. Us doctors are responsible for telling people 50 years that fat was the problem when sugar was the problem. Sugar was the problem. The Sugar Institute, the government, we physicians let people have the disease. Instead, we could have gotten rid of it. What are we facing across the world? This pandemic of type 2 diabetes and its horrible diseases, which include strokes and vascular disease and dementia. And now we find out the virus feeds on sugar. The virus has no metabolic system. It feeds on sugar. If we weren't eating so much sugar, the death rate would go down. Why the government doesn't mention that on either political party, I don't understand. I can show you the books. This is factual, okay? And so olive oil is something good to put on your salads. It's a good fat. We have good fats and bad fats. And good fats are not sugar, okay? Insulin doesn't go up when you eating good fats, okay? So there's a book out called Your Perfect Memory by The Brain Improvement Program by Tony Buzan, B-U-Z-A-N. I encourage you to read it. Because he recommends methods of improving your brain, okay? And so in the beginning, he has you even take a test on names and naming objects and try to find out if you have a memory problem. I'm not too sure to take it because you might be so discouraged that you're not doing good on these tests. But if you want to test, it's the beginning of his book. So what he's saying is the brain is a keyboard. You know, piano is a keyboard on which hundreds of millions of difficult melodies can be played. Now, we use maybe 20% of our brain normally. Mm-hmm. That's the reason I'm so optimistic about that you can maintain your memory and improve it. Yeah, your memory is like a keyboard, and we only use 20% of it. The point of what he's saying is, we get to teach you the music, teach you the program, and isn't that great news? Okay, most people remember maybe 10% of what they hear names of people. They forget 99% of phone numbers that people tell them right away unless you write it down or repeat it, use some memory technique. And so you have to develop some systems to help remember things, okay? One is called the link system, and I'll tell you more about it. You link it to something, okay? PEG system, where you hook it to a number. The link system might relate it to an image or another object. And telephone numbers, you need to repeat them or write them down, but that's the reason there's 7 digits. Your brain is more likely to remember it. Repeating it a few times, it'll stick. Also, when you're looking at someone's face, look at it in detail, okay? So if you're trying to remember something, look for something unusual about it. Maybe a second look, maybe a third look. And then if you're looking at we have facial memory, okay? We have the name the person has. If you don't listen to it in the first place, I myself, years ago when I was a busy neurosurgeon, I was so worried about being paralyzed, life and death. This is what worried me. So when you introduce me to somebody, do you think I ever listened to the name? No. Someone tells you the name, listen to it. Repeat it to yourself, okay? Maybe write it down. Ask them to spell it, or when they're leaving, use their name. And many tricks to help. So it's not a matter of whether you have good memory or not, it's whether you have learned the techniques. There are memory techniques, yes. They've even found that when we have really great memorists who can remember 1,000 numbers, different numbers and cards and like that, you know what they found out? It's a method you learn. That the people actually had average memories. Yeah, you saw them in circuses and shows. These people, the majority, had average memories. They just learned a technique. Mm-hmm. Maybe you could work at that, okay? And like if you look at somebody's facial memory is something that seems to be a little bit easier than names, for example, but look at different parts of the face. Look them in the eyes. Look at the eyebrows. Look at the color of their hair. Look at the mouth. Look at the lipstick. The shape of the ears. Then you're much more likely to remember the face. Very interesting. So let's go back through the history of memory, and this is fascinating. So they did not know how people remembered things, couple thousand years ago. Okay, in the 4th century BC, Plato thought when people heard things, it was written down on a wax tablet in your body. They didn't even put it in the head. They didn't even put it in the brain. Mm-hmm. They thought maybe it was on the heart. They didn't know for sure. And so Zeno, Z-N-O, about 100 years later, thought you remember things because it was written on that tablet. They maybe on your heart, but they still did not know it was the brain. So Aristotle finally concluded that this 3-pound piece of fat up there was where memories were located. Okay, and he in the 3rd century, Hemophilus thought that there were animal spirits up there which were memorizing things for you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then they finally thought, well, the brains of animals and humans, the brain ones seemed to have a lot of depths and valleys, and they were bigger, and they could, because humans could memorize things better than an animal could. But they found out since then animals actually have better memories than we think they do. Like songbirds, for example, they've demonstrated that little animal with that dinky little brain can learn new songs. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very interesting. And so the Greeks finally thought there was a physical basis of memory. It's located up there. And then the Romans got into it a little bit too. So the Romans figured out that you could memorize things better by linking them. Remember I spoke about linking it to something? And then the Romans came along. They even developed, they had great memorists in those days. The senators could remember every word of a speech. Mm-hmm. Almost every Roman senator could. And they were using the link system, but also something called the Roman room. The Roman room. They would, in their mind's eye, think of a very complex room with columns, and you would walk in and lamps and couches and flowers and statues, and you would hang a memory on each one of those. Mm-hmm. And you linked it, and you were much more likely to memorize it. And they would memorize the whole speech. They put it into a Roman room, and and those people had tremendous memories. Were their memories any better than ours? I doubt it. They had a system. They had a system. Isn't that very interesting? They were called the Roman rooms. Mm-hmm. Like I said, their senators and their Senate had fantastic, unbelievable memories, and so did their preachers, and it was used in religion, for example. So it wasn't until the 19th century, 2,000 years later, that the brain became of primary importance. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Before that, spirituality, imagination, no one was sure. God, they did not know where the memory for certain was located, okay? And even in the 2nd century, Galen thought memory was a mental process, was part of an animal spirit existing in our body. Yeah, and then the church got involved with it in the 4th century. St. Augustine thought it was a function of the soul. Mm-hmm. Yeah, isn't this interesting? So even Rene Descartes, I don't know if you ever heard the name or not, but that's very interesting. We're talking about the 17th century, and physicians of the day, teachers of the day, were unable to do autopsies. The church forbade it, couldn't do it. So Rene Descartes, a philosopher, medical man, what he did, because they have in conflict with the church, it was before the Renaissance, that he negotiated with the religious people, cut the head off the body and gave it to the church. That was theirs. That was theirs, okay? And he gave the body to medicine. And then medicine was able to do autopsies, study the human bodies. But I tell you honestly, we doctors still don't get it. We don't realize that this is attached to the human body. Well, we see it attached, but we don't realize the hormones, the neurotransmitters, the vagus nerves, trillions of neurotransmitters, many nerves, neuropeptides, 50 different hormones our body makes, affect each other. The brain speaks to the gut, and the gut speaks to the brain. It's connected. So when a patient goes to see a doctor, first thing they should say, unless it was a big accident or something obvious, the doctor should say, every visit, what's going on in your life? You got to find out. Is there a divorce going on? Is there stress going on? Are the kids driving them crazy? I, as a doctor, saw many patients like that, to the point I wrote a book. It's on Amazon. Welcome to Your Mind, Body. I had read Kenneth Pert's book, PRT, Molecules of Emotion, published 1969. Yeah. Yet we in medicine don't realize still that this hardly ever taught. I was talked to senior med students and asked him if ever had read Kenneth Pert's book, Molecules of Emotion. He'd say no. I'd bet anything on it. This thing affects the human body to the point that I wrote a book on it, Welcome to Your Mind, Body, because it was a revelation to me. Fortunately, I learned about it 40 years ago. But in medicine today, they still don't teach that this affects us. We're not just our X-ray. We are not just our X-ray, our blood test, or our electronic test, or whatever. We have an emotional body, a hormonal body. We need to realize that, and it affects our memory. In the 20th century, Ebbinghaus began to speak about brain stimulation that Penfield did, like in Montreal, where he stimulated the brain and then saw a movement, began to realize that there was an electrical, maybe even a hormonal connection between brain stimulation and the body affected. So that, and then Scoville, because the patient was having uncontrollable seizures, I could see his point at Mass General, I think it was, he took off the medial anterior part of both temporal lobes, okay? Both temporal lobes that are packed in the side of your brain. And the patient recovered, and the seizures were less, but he had no forward antegrade memory. He could remember things in the past, but nothing he was doing in the future. He had lost his antegrade memory. That's another definition. Yeah, and he lived many years, but he couldn't process new information. He could tell you about past information, and it became a little bit better, but it did tell you a little bit. So memory is indeed located in different parts of the brain. Like musical memory, maybe almost throughout the brain, more in the occipital lobes in the back, a little bit in the cerebellum. But there are different areas of the brain that are affected. Emotional memory is in the amygdala, of the temporal lobes. That's where most of the emotional reaction memory is. So there are different locations. And there are principles, secrets of supermemories, okay? Superpower memory. The Greeks thought they were so interested in memory, they even named memory a god. Yeah. Mnemonics, call it mnemonics. She was a god. And she had children too. So the Greek and Roman senators practiced these memory techniques, and they gave credit to the gods. Okay, and there are two very important memory links. Two very important ones. Visualization. If you visualize something, that's a good memory link. For example, when the great golfers, for example, go up to hit the ball, the professionals, you know what they visualize? Where the ball lands, not hitting it. That's already imprinted on their brain. So before I serve a tennis ball, when I walk back, pick the ball up, I always visualize my technique where the ball is going to land. That's improved my serve. People who are very good at sports use that all the time. So you start visualizing things that you're doing. That's a great link. Visualize the person you're talking to. You're more likely to remember them, what they look like, for example. And use it in your life. Visualization is something really, one of the most effective memory techniques that there is. Another one is to link it to something, okay? Another word, another place, and make it something unusual. Make it something hysterical. You're more likely to remember it. Actually, the most effective memory technique, if you make it something sexual, you're much more likely to remember it. That's in books. I didn't just make that up. So something wild, sexual, you're more likely to bring it back. Let me tell you other things that are more likely to improve your memory. You know, like I said, if you make it something sensual, if it has some movement, if there's some association, some imagination to it, you can peg it to a number, and you can 1 to 10. You can get in the habit of it. Those are techniques that are well known. And I put some color to it. You're more likely to remember. A wild, sensual memory and color, you're much more likely to remember. And a positive image works better than a negative image. Okay. And so we spoke about the PEG system, connected to a number, the link system, the visualization, okay. We spoke about the Roman room, where you hang memories on different things located in your room, and you can develop one room yourself. Just be a good habit. Design your own room. Get a piece of paper and a pencil. Design a great room with a lot of things to hang things on. And this is your memory room. This is your memory room, and you use it in the future for things you're trying to include in your most recent working memory. Wouldn't that be a good idea? Yeah. Like you meet 5 different people at once, and you put them in this room with some imaginative visualizations and link them at the same time. You might remember them. I've been using those techniques because, remember, I said I had trouble remembering names. I never heard them in the first place because I was worried about life and death and paralysis, and so to work a little bit on this, I think is a good idea. Other people use the alphabet system. They hang it to certain words and different pronunciations, and and I told you about a face, looking at details on the face. So here's some memory steps to follow, okay? Make up your mind, I'm going to learn a new technique, so observe, real seeing. Not a transient look. Have a real look and a detailed look. And then is there a scar there? What color is a lipstick? What color are the eyes? That'd be a real link. And listen, see if there's anything distinctive about what they said. Maybe a political statement you don't agree with. Yeah. He swallowed the Kool-Aid. If you said that, I have a friend who I think swallowed the Kool-Aid, and whatever I mean, I didn't say who, and I'll never forget anything he says related to that. I've linked it to the Kool-Aid. Okay, and maybe you can verify a pronunciation. That way they're repeating the word. Request a spelling. That's more likely for you to increase your ability to remember it. Cards are a good way too to link things to. I mean, some people can remember a whole deck, and what they have done is link things together. And they found out people that are really good, for example, they memorize the whole deck like that. If you were to check their regular memory, it's average. They have practiced, just like my tennis or pickleball game. Okay, repetition works. Writing it down works. So pace yourself, have fun with it, and as we get a day older, it would be nice to have developed some memory system that works for us. It'll keep you sharp. Remember I said most of memory loss, they may call it Alzheimer's disease. It's a normal process of aging. Don't live into the role, okay? So what are risk factors for developing memory loss? Poor diet, eat a lot of sugar. Remember what I said about diabetes and the sugar and the insulin destroying your memory, the amyloid, the neurofibrillary tangles, the proteins that come from the gut and climb up the vagus nerve and make your brain sticky so things don't conduct very well. So a nutrient-dense way of eating, a vegetable, fruit, a little bit of meat's fine, and eating good fats, guacamole and nuts and seeds, not bad fats, which are full of inflammatory factors. Diabetes, remember, causes, I'd say 2/3 of dementia due to diabetes. You can get rid of type 2 diabetes 6 weeks. Look at my websites. 6 weeks. Eat the right food. I'll show you. Sugar's a booger on the hooker. Okay, but a little bit more than that. So look at my websites. Stress helps lead because it causes secretion of steroids, which cause secretion of sugars. So stress, a lot of people were stressed day after day after day have pot bellies because they're having to eat sugary foods to feel good. Eating sugar is like taking in cocaine. Sugar is more addictive than cocaine. I debated some of that once on this very show, and I think they won the debate. Sugar is very addictive. And then they speak about diseases being related to Alzheimer's disease, like vascular disease, high blood pressure, things like that. That's all caused by diabetes. Get rid of your diabetes, you won't have high blood pressure, you won't have vascular disease, you won't have heart attacks, you won't have strokes, you won't have amputations, you won't have microvascular disease, you'll decrease cancer rates 70%. Poor sleep, remember I spoke about the brain needs to be washed out, so poor sleep is a risk factor. So eat 4 hours before you go to sleep if you can. Head trauma, head injuries are destructive to memory. I mean, I saw patients where, you had to remove quite a bit of brain because it's so swollen and hemorrhages, and these people had memory problems, no doubt about it. Sedentary behavior results in developing diabetes and things of this nature, so get moving. Exercise is neuroprotective. Smoking increases microvascular disease. Smoking affects every cell in the body. People who smoke have much higher risk of dementia. One of the worst ones of all is alcohol. I, as a neurosurgeon, saw so many patients with blood clots on top of their brain, very little headache. For a long time, the brain would get smaller and smaller, and blood clots would form because a lot of room there, and there would be liquid clots. They didn't suddenly hemorrhage like from an injury. The spinal fluid turned black or brown. and maybe even shift the brain way over because the brain was going away. Every drink of alcohol destroys a certain number of brain cells. Every drink. They used to think, well, 2 or 3 glasses of wine a week's okay, but now the latest scientific papers, every drink destroys some brain cells. To my disappointment, I used to, drink a couple of glasses of wine a week, maybe 3. And years before that, maybe even a margarita, okay? Because of the stress when I wasn't working. And, but I drink nothing. And I tell you one quick funny story. I had a lady in the hospital who had put a hole there, and the skull let out a lot of fluid, and what it was from alcohol consumption. And the brain was way down, so it took the brain a long time to come back up. That come up a little bit, but it'd never be normal. And so I walked into intensive care 6 weeks, every day wearing a different suit. I like fancy clothes. Okay, I'm guilty. And it makes me feel good. And I will walk in, and then she left the hospitals, and one day she came to see me in follow-up, and there she was sitting in most beautiful clothes on, 79 years old, red dress on, black high heels, phony hair, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. And I said, Jane, what's this all about? And I looked at the chief of intensive care 6 weeks. She said, Dr. Cashman, you waltzed in and out of my room for 6 weeks straight. I couldn't talk because the brain still wasn't up. She didn't know why, but she couldn't talk. She could see me, but she couldn't talk till the brain came back up. You think I was going to come see you today when I looked at the fancy clothes for 6 weeks and that really dress up? I just wish I'd taken a picture of her. But I think you remember now when I spoke about alcohol. So what things can help? Exercise, stop drinking, don't smoke, eat a plant-based diet, meat a couple of days a week, get adequate sleep. Remember I told you about the 4-hour thing. Social engagement is helpful. Some of the memory games I told you about, computer games, card games, chess, all these things are helpful for long-term memory, okay, for long-term memory. And continue learning. Read a book. I read a book probably every 3 days. I'm through another book because all the TV shows and lectures I give. It's the joy of my life. And I have a purpose in my life. I want to get you well. I want you to get over things. Even the pharmacy now by Concordia High, I'm converting into preventing and reversing diabetes center. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I have a purpose. Develop a purpose in life. And I feel so lucky I have a purpose. And then I exercise the pickleball and tennis and tap dancing. God, take that up because if you have trouble moving, that's not my reason. But I've gotten so good at it now. I'm really moving. I'm tap dancing. I am moving, and I'm developing harmony and rhythm, improvisation. I have it, feel it in my body. I just play a new song, and that reminds me. I had my Alexa play a song for me just before I left today called Memories, Barbra Streisand. Tell Alexa, play Barbra Streisand, Memories. After listening this one out, you deserve that song. I'd have played it for you today, but copyright problems. Okay? Stress, by just taking a walk in nature whenever you can. I even do in the wintertime. When I get done here today, I'll go out if it's still light. And take a walk. You just dress warmer than usual, permitting, depending where you live. But I take a walk almost every day. Now look at the plants. I may even sing or whistle to the birds. They whistle back. I have a red bird that follows me around every day, sitting there. He's even here in the wintertime. Even in the wintertime. So I'm trying to connect you socially to nature, and your memory will improve. Alzheimer's disease, as you well know, it affects memory, thinking, mood, problem solving. It can slowly come on. But like I said, though, I get it straight. Alzheimer's disease is not a genetic disease except very rarely. where you can do nothing about it, okay? And I don't like it that they call dementia Alzheimer's disease. We all develop some memory loss. Don't live into the role. Do these things, and you will largely avoid this progression. If some progression occurs and grandpa is missing a few words or your wife is missing words, don't say, you have dementia. Baloney, it's a normal process of aging. Just help them develop techniques, maybe read some of these books. Peter Whitehouse, head of neurology at Cleveland Clinic, even wrote a book about Alzheimer's disease because he thought most of the people were living into the role. So I went on and wrote a book here, a short book, easy to read, because it kind of excited me because he suggested, which is true, I saw many examples of it, that people are living into the role of dementia. It's a normal process of aging most of the time, and just help teach them how to develop a purpose or take up exercise or eat the right food. To the point, I named my book The Fraud of Alzheimer's Disease, okay? He called it The Myth of Alzheimer's Disease, Peter Whitehouse. I read the book 2 or 3 times. I even called him on the phone and talked to him. And because his specialty was Alzheimer's disease, and he realized the majority of people didn't have it. Normal process of aging. Another great book, The Sharper Brain's Guide to Brain Fitness. Some of the fitness things I spoke about. Get this book. This has a different systems in it, discussion by different doctors in it. I think it's an excellent book to read. I've probably got 50 books at home on dementia and Alzheimer's disease. I couldn't bring them all in today. I guess that's a good thought. But I gave you, I think, the best things out of this that you could remember. And I see people for free at the Three Rivers Pharmacy. If you want your memory improved or get rid of diabetes, I'll see you there for free. Why is that? Because I care about you. I love you. And I hope you enjoyed this little discussion, because it's just the beginning. I will teach you more. Have a great day. Namaste.